Hello, welcome. Have you ever wondered about the origins of Ankara or African print? Today's live, I'm going to be discussing the origin of African print versus fancy print. Sorry, African wax print versus fancy print because yes, there is a difference. We'll go through the history and I'm also going to discuss how you can take care of your African print clothing. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I encourage you to stick around, subscribe, like the video, and let's have a conversation. Before I jump into the topic, an introduction. My name is Ashanwa. Welcome to LAJA. This is a channel dedicated to African fashion prints and textiles. I'm very passionate about African prints and textiles and just showcasing the different ways they can be incorporated into your wardrobe and lifestyle to make them more modern and more palatable for different seasons, occasions, and outings. So if that's something that you feel you share with me, join my community of growing African print enthusiasts and let's learn and grow together. So, on to the topic at hand. So, if you are not African or if you're African, you've probably heard of the term Ankara or African print, and that typically is what a symbol or a piece. It's a symbol of African culture, especially West African culture and pride. Some people call it Ankara, some people call it wax print, some people call it fancy print. So the first thing that I'm going to go into is just the differentiation between African print versus fancy African wax print versus African fancy print. So African wax print has a wax resin that is used to glaze the surface of the material. It has a crackling effect which gives it its glistening and it helps it have this shine and also helps to preserve the color through washes. This is the original African wax print that started off the existence of this textile, and it actually has Dutch origins. So before I go into the history, onto fancy prints or African fancy prints are also a type of Ankara material or Ankara textile as well, but they don't have the wax or the resin finish that cause it to glisten and shine. And so typically African fancy prints are less expensive. They're printed on one side, so the quality is not as palatable and the quality is not as high, and it is often more cost effective, I would say. So if you're joining this live now, I'm talking about the history of and origins of African fancy prints versus African wax prints. So if that's something you're interested in, I encourage you to stick around and let me share more. So what are the origins of African prints? Are they really African? What are the origins and the history? So I'll start off by saying that African prints are worn by people of Central and West African origins, and it's worn by people of all socioeconomic ladders, sexes, classes, and even livelihoods. So it is known to be a symbol of African pride and African culture, and different regions have their unique African prints and textiles, but it's more concentrated within the Central and West Africa. So we're going to start with the history of African wax prints. So the origins of wax prints starts from the 19th century, where Indonesians making Japanese batik using a wax resist dyeing method that was very manually intensive. This is the foundation of what is today's African wax print. At the same time, Europeans were brainstorming ways to mass produce Japanese batik textile in hopes of flooding the Indonesian market. They were successful in their efforts, and as a result, the wax roller print was born. Unfortunately, during the process of the creation of the imitation batik textile, the roller print caused a crackling effect during the printing process that caused dye to seep through the cloth. So it had this crackling effect, and this was an abomination to the Indonesian market. So when the Europeans tried to introduce the imitation Japanese batik into the Indonesian market, they were rejected in their efforts because of this crackling effect that the textile had as a result of the printing process. At the same time, the West African men were being recruited by the Dutch to serve in Indonesia as slaves, mercenaries, and soldiers. So these men, they would come back from their escapades and would bring back these imitation batik textiles, which became very popular in their local communities. Seeing this, Europeans put or pivoted their efforts from the Indonesian or the Asian markets to the West African markets, and things took off from there. So that was how African wax print was introduced into the continent. It was first brought into the Gold Coast, which is known as Ghana today, and things essentially just took off. And the funny thing, this is why you just know that one man's meat is truly another man's poison. But the crackling effect that caused the Indonesians to reject the fabric because it wasn't viewed as authentic and pure is the same reason that the Africans and the West Africans ended up loving it. And now you see that a lot of African wax prints are intentionally cracked to give that effect because it's so much loved by the West African audience that do consume it. So that is essentially the origins of African wax print. So we're going to move on to, or before we move on to African fancy print, the origins and the history, I'm going to just go through the comments for a bit. I see that there are a few people on here. Thank you all for joining. Levi, Ed, on Go With The Flow, Gar Supreme. Hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining this live. And for those of you who are watching the replay or joining in the middle of the live, I'm discussing the origins of African wax prints and African fancy prints and if they're really African. So you see that with African wax prints, the origins are pretty controversial. They have ties in Asian, European, and also African roots as well. So I won't say African prints are entirely African in their origins, but I'll leave my commentary to the end to give my opinion and my final verdict on how I feel about African prints and textiles. So we're going to go on to the second one, which is the origins of African fancy prints. So in the early 20th century, so in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, direct printing technique was introduced to print and mass produce cheap wax print. Symbols, images can be printed on the cloth, which was a primary reason for the success of fancy prints. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, after a lot of West African countries began declaring their independence, they also set up their local factories to manufacture fancy prints for the unique communities. They were successful in driving European textile manufacturers out of business, and the textile industry was thriving during that era, so the 50s, 60s, and 70s. However, in the 90s, there was a shift due to changes in trade relations and socioeconomic affairs, which caused the influx of China-made textiles or African prints into the market, which were in fact even cheaper than the local made textiles and the Dutch textiles, which are usually the most expensive. So with this influx of China-made prints that were very, very inexpensive to make, the local textile manufacturers were unable to compete either due to pricing, outdated technology was a big issue, and also outdated infrastructure as well was a big issue. So this really caused a decline in the local textile industry, and today you see that China prints or Chinese African prints are rampant in the market. So I had done a video on African print manufacturers you should know. So I encourage you to go and watch that video. You can search for it on my channel to just learn more about the different African print manufacturers that exist today. So that is essentially the history of fancy prints. So in terms of their use, so fancy prints is usually commissioned for special occasions. So if someone wants to do a special occasion like a birthday or a burial or even weddings as well, they can get fancy prints commission because it's a very easy printing process. The only downside is since it doesn't have the wax resist resin covering or finishing like wax print does, African wax print does, the color does tend to fade a little bit quicker on fancy prints than they do on wax prints. So there's that. It's cheaper, but you also, it's a little bit less quality in terms of longevity and staying power. I do own a combination of fancy prints and wax prints, and they're high quality ones as well in both categories. So it's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other. When you go to the market, the tiers of prints or textiles, African prints you can go and afford is number one, you have Chinese African prints, which are usually the cheapest ones. And you notice that they're often printed on one side. And after that tier, you have African or West African prints, which is like Ghana prints, Cote d'Ivoire prints, Cameroonian prints, and then the highest tier in terms of pricing is Dutch wax or Dutch prints, and that's usually your viscose and more. So that's usually the most expensive, and the Dutch waxes are typically considered luxury. I love Visco. I'm a huge fan of them. I know I had shared the story earlier on that when I was in college, before I graduated, I was looking for a job and I had reached out to someone from the Visco headquarters in Netherlands, and I was like, hire me, please. I want to work for you. Please hire me. And no one responded. So it's all good that at least I put myself out there, but I'm a huge fan of Visco. I own several of their prints and textiles from my mom, and also some that I've purchased by myself, and they're great. So it all really depends on your budget. But yeah, so as you can see, just to conclude, the origins of African prints are very controversial, as you can tell and see by the history. It has lots of roots in colonialism, it has a lot of roots in kind of like grabbing the culture from trying to imitate other people's culture and things like that. But I truly believe that African prints, African wax prints, African fancy prints will always be a symbol of West African pride, especially for people outside the continent. Like you can't come to Nigeria or Ghana or Togo and not leave with a type of African print, whether it's fancy or wax prints. It's just such a symbol of West African pride. And if you look in the States as well, which is where I am, I'm in the US, you see the popularity in pop culture. You can see the dashiki trend, which is so rampant. Like people use them for graduations, people use them for all sorts of things. And it's kind of like a representation of Black power here in the United States. So I really don't think that belief of having African prints be a symbol of the continent is going anywhere anytime soon. And the truth is that we live in a global economy, and there's just a lot of interconnectedness and change that happens when people travel and mix and pick up different cultures. So do I mind? I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not going to lie, to find out that African prints didn't really have African origins, if that makes sense. But they did become African because local people would ascribe meanings to the textiles through symbols and text as well. So inherently, West Africans are the ones who consume it the most. So I think that's something we can take for ourselves. I truly hope and pray that the local textile industries are able to recover from the influx of China, the effects that China has had on them. But they still exist. You just have to be intentional and ask the right questions. And it even brings me to why I wanted to start this channel as well. And that's because there are a lot more African textiles that are unique to Africa than African prints or African wax prints or African fancy prints. That's just one and happens to be the most popular one that we have right now. But there's so many other ones. There's Kente, there's Mudcloth, there's Shwe Shwe, there's Capulana cloth. And so I really started this channel to share the diversity and the different ones that exist outside African wax prints. I'm not saying they will ever be as popular as African wax prints, but they all stand and have their own significances in their own right. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. Oh, before I leave, let me check the comments and then I will go into how to care for your African wax and fancy prints. So let's see. Jose Hernandez says bonjour. Hi, Jose. Bonjour. Open the top of the morning. Hey, Will. Good morning. Jose said they're lost. Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll work with Lisco and we'll see what happens. I'm just staying open to all the possibilities that could happen. Side note, you have great style. Thank you so much, Jose. That is so kind and sweet of you. So it looks like these are all the comments that I have so far. So now I'm going to go into how to take care of your fancy and wax prints. Depending on the one that you purchase, if you get the wax prints that have the wax raising, those are usually more long wearing and they really stand the test of time. The colors hardly fade because of the wax finish that is put on the cloth. But my general advice for taking care of African wax prints, because the material that it's made from is cotton, so it's a natural fiber, it's very breathable and it's very conducive for all seasons. So how do you take care of them? First is, if you're in the States and you have a washing machine or a dryer, I recommend that you wash it on the gentle cycle in cold water only to prevent color bleeding. Because a lot of times, like these pants I'm wearing, you can see how bright they are. African textiles, African fancy prints or wax prints is usually very bright in its color. And yeah, you don't want it to bleed and stain other clothing. So I suggest you wash it in cold water on a gentle setting. If you're outside the States, say you're in Nigeria, it's typically done by hand. You hand wash it. I think that's honestly the best way to really preserve the color and the quality of your clothing, because washing machines can be really tough. And that's why I suggested that you use the gentle cycle and wash on cold only. I also suggest that you avoid harsh chemicals like bleach and you use a gentle detergent for it. I don't know any brands. You could just do search at your local Walmart and look for a gentle detergent that you can use specifically for your African print clothing. That's personally what I do. I just use a basic detergent and I get good results essentially. And number 3, you don't want to wash your African print clothing all the time, because again, these are natural fibers and it's made from cotton, so it's very breathable. So unless you sweat, I don't think you need to wash your clothing that often. The ones that you wear in a day-to-day, if you wear it to the office, wear it to the supermarkets, wear it to the mall and things like that, you don't need to wash it that often. People always think like, oh, I have to wear a t-shirt once and then I wash it. I don't ascribe to that belief system. I wear it a couple times before I do wash it. For instance, this top of mine is linen. And I know when I want to wash it, I only wash it on a cold setting because linen has a tendency to shrink. And then another thing, so we've talked about washing. Onto drying, I recommend you air dry. Do not use the dryer for your African print clothing because it's going to cause it to wear and tear a lot quicker. So hang it on a hanger and leave it to air dry, and you will be fine. I air dry my natural fiber clothing often. So like my linen, my cotton, my silks. Or my silks, I get those dry cleaned. But for cotton, your African print clothing, please air dry them so that you can really preserve the color. You don't have to put them in the direct sun. You can, depending on which you get. If you get like a fancy print, wax prints don't usually fade over time because they're usually very well done and well manufactured. But you want to be careful with your fancy prints, because those have a tendency to fade over time if you continuously leave them in the sun, wash them in hot water, put them in the tumble dryer, and more. So I recommend air drying them, excuse me. So I think those are all my tips for taking care of your African print clothing. Oh, last thing I just remembered: if you want to iron them, you can iron them on low heat, or you could steam them. A steamer is a great option. I actually don't use irons. Do people still use irons anymore? If we're being honest, like I don't like ironing. It's just one of those things that I absolutely hate doing when it comes to chores. But you can steam your African print clothing. Those would work perfectly well, and I've done that a lot and I've been fine and gotten excellent results. So those are my 4 tips for taking care of your African print. If you're joining just now, I went through, you can catch the replay, but I went through the origins of African prints versus African wax prints versus African fancy prints. I went through the difference between African prints and African wax prints. I think I'm going to do a separate video on how to differentiate between African fancy versus African wax prints, and so that you all are even more informed when you go to make your purchasing decisions. And then I also went through the controversial history of African wax and fancy prints, and we learned that they don't have the cleanest or the most African origins. But that is all good because they will always be a symbol of West African pride and culture, at least for me. And then finally, we went through how to care for your African print clothing, and my recommendations were to gentle wash in cold water to prevent color bleeding, avoiding harsh chemicals and bleaches, air drying and avoiding machine drying, and ironing on low heat or steaming. So that is it for the teaching portion of this video. I am opening it up to questions, comments, and concerns that anyone may have at this time. I'm happy to address it. I know I came on live pretty early today. I'm just testing out different times and just doing what's working for me, honestly, because I really felt it in my spirit that I needed to get this video out and really start a conversation around it. And yeah, any questions? I know that, at least for me, when I found out that African prints weren't really African, was I sad? I wouldn't say I was sad per se. I was just a little bit taken aback by the whole thing, and I got over it, honestly. I'm not mad about it, because like I said, countries influence each other, and even when you study a lot of like Nigerian history as well, there's a lot of like taking from other tribes and other cultures and assimilating it into your own. So I didn't really think that was any different, but it's just one of those things that I have to live with, and I hope you can too. But let me know, were you disappointed when you found out that African prints weren't truly African? Do you have any questions for me? Those who are joining the live right now, the topic of discussion is the origins of African fancy and wax prints, how to take care of them, and the difference between them. So I see a question from Jose. I'm new. Do you make clothing? Jose, thank you for your question. So I don't make clothing at this time. I just purchased my wax prints or fancy prints, and I have my clothing made that I wear personally in Nigeria. So I don't actually make clothing or own have a clothing line. I did have a clothing line back when I was in college, and I had a business that was selling like dresses, skirts, and things like that. I was pretty successful. Is that something that I'm open to doing in future or down the line? I would say if the opportunity presents itself, yes, I'm open to doing that. But right now, I'm really just focused on building my community and trying to find out what you all would love to see from me. So, yeah, Jose, I hope that answers your question. Oh, speaking of which, I can actually do a quick outfit check. So I know people were complimenting my outfits. Thank you all so much. But this is my outfit of the day. I'm actually going to wear this to work because it's 8:30 right now and I'm ready for work. After I'm going to head into work after this. But this is what my outfit looks like. I have this Ankara pants. They're very, very chic. So this is what they look like. And I have this off-shoulder linen top in this color. I was just feeling really bright today, honestly. So I have this top, and then for my accessories, I have my handmade lapis lazuli headband, which I actually hand make myself. So I make these crystal headbands. I have them in different crystals. This is the lapis lazuli. I have them in amethyst, rose quartz, carnelian, citrine, and black tourmaline. So if you're someone that's into crystals and you're a crystal lover and you love this headband, you can actually pick it up on my website, misslaja.com. And then I have these earrings which are handmade in Nigeria by my mom. I also sell them on my website, misslaja.com. They come in different colors like red. This is the red here. I'm just wearing the gold today. This is the pink. If you look at my shorts, I wear them all the time. So this is the pink over here. I also have it in white. Oh, Jose, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in a bit. Just 1 second. This is the white, and then this is the black. Yeah, so those are the colors that I have. So that's my outfit, and I have my accessories, my bracelets, my rings, and yeah, this is black onyx. So okay, Jose's question. So you have your clothes made in those certain patterns and colors then? Yes, Jose. So I pick out the material. So I buy it from like either Vlisco or my mom buys it from me while she's in Nigeria, Daviva. There are different brands, Ghana textiles. I pick out the textiles that I like, Adire. And then I pick my style. So one thing you should know, Jose, is that like getting your clothing made custom in Nigeria is pretty affordable. So I love doing that because I like having unique pieces in my wardrobe that other people don't have. So I play more the role of the designer, if that makes sense. So I pick my designs and I pick my styles, and then I communicate that to the tailor, and the tailor executes and makes my clothing. Oh, Jose, I actually did a live on called African Prince Clothing Haul, and I went through all the new clothing that African Prince clothing I got from Nigeria that were actually custom made by my tailor, so you can have an idea of like what my aesthetics and taste is, if that makes sense. But these pants that I'm wearing right now, where my mom purchased them from me, this is the fancy print pants, and it was bought ready to wear, so I didn't actually have this sewn because in Nigeria there are a lot of like designers who there are lots of designers who manufacture who actually sew ready to wear African print clothing. So yeah, I just do a combination of both. I get to exercise my creativity, but I also get to support local businesses as well. Those are things that are really important to me. So hope that answers your question. I saw that they all looked amazing. Thank you, Jose. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you liked the pieces and you actually watched the video as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And you, oh, Jose, it looks like, are you Hernandez? Jose Hernandez. So you just like to keep it traditional then? I wouldn't actually say I keep it traditional. Cause my own vision for my channel is to make it modern and show the different ways it can be incorporated into your wardrobe and lifestyle in a modern way. So it's still keeping the traditional elements of it, but with a modern twist. Does that make sense? Like, for instance, this is something, these pants, I can wear them to the office, I can wear them to run errands, I can wear them to lounge around the house and stuff like that. They're very versatile, and that's really what I'm trying to promote, because people always think that African prints is just for like going to church, going to a wedding, going to a burial, for like special occasions. But I'm really trying to show how you can incorporate it and make it more of a daily staple. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying, Jose? I hope that answers your question though. Yeah. Um yeah. So any other questions, Jose, or anyone that is on the live? I wish I was more knowledgeable about this, but I do like it. Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to really share the knowledge, and share the wisdom as well. So you can binge watch my videos if you want to catch up to speed. If you have any topic suggestions, Jose, please let me know that you want to see from me. I'm really open to providing the content that my audience wants to see. So you can either leave it on here or leave it in the comment section after the live is posted, and we can go from there. But I really appreciate you joining my life. It's really nice chatting with you, because I feel like sometimes when I do these lives, I'm like, are people watching? But it's just good to see that I actually have an audience, and it feels good interacting with you all for sure. So Jose, nice chatting with you, and great questions you asked as well. Okay, so I have like 2 minutes left because I do have to head out to work now. So if you have any last minute questions, Jose, or anyone that's on the live, or if not, you can always drop your questions and suggestions in the comment section. I respond to all my comments, and yeah, we can honestly go from there. I'm going to be live streaming more often. I have a lot of topic ideas, but I'm also open to your suggestions as well, so please let me know. So Jose says, no problem, I was definitely interested in your talks. Thank you so much, Jose. I'll definitely watch some more. Yeah, thank you. And if you have any suggestions as well, you can leave them for me. And Jose also said, I'll try supporting any way I can. Thank you so much, Jose. I truly do appreciate it. I already listed the ways you can support my channel. It could be as little as liking my video and sharing it with someone you think may be interested in it. Or you could purchase my products, my headbands, my earrings, and I also do consultations as well. So for African print styling, so anything that, those are the different levels that you could support me and my work. So I really appreciate that. But it was nice talking with you all, nice chatting with you, Jose. I have to go now, but I will see you in my next live, hopefully, and we'll go from there. Bye. Bye, Jose.